Hey guys, welcome to round 3 of NSORRA. This is at Beaver Ride Park in Nova Scotia. Running Intermediate A again this round, 2-hour race. Helmets on the head here. Again, no K start. Caleb definitely got the whole shot there again, coming around that corner. We got Hussey here on the left of me. Griffin was just to the right, you saw his front right fender, so I knew these boys were leading the pack for most of the season here. Griffin's had some really good podium finishes this year, so I knew he was hungry to do well again. He's had 2 first place. Both Hussey and I had mechanical issues the first round, so we didn't get any points that time. So I knew Hussey was hungry coming out this round. He got 4th place there in round 2 at Mill Hill, so I knew he was hungry. Quite dusty here on the motocross track, so I was hanging back a little further than I should have. I just couldn't quite remember all the turns that well and not familiar with the train, so I did try to keep a little bit of gap just for some space. So I'm sitting in 3rd position right now, coming through these little switchback flowy section. Kind of a fun little section here that goes down the ravine. But I come down to this section here and I saw a new line and I thought I'd give it a try. And it was quite a drop and I didn't get on the gas enough. Whacked myself pretty good on the right shoulder and the chest a little bit there. Rattled my helmet a little bit, but nothing too catastrophic. Nobody got around me, so I'm assuming the amount of dust that happened on the motocross track probably kept a few guys back a little further potentially, so that might have worked in my favor. But I knew the first lap was just kind of get settled down. It always seems to take me a little while to get rolling, get settled in. Griffin, I knew he was behind me there. I saw him getting a little closer, so I let him go by. That KTM's spicy. It works real good. He hit me with some roost a few times, and I wasn't even near him, so I knew he was getting onto her, so he had a little bit of making up to do. There's 2 guys in front of him, so I'm sitting in 4th place. Coming up to this little loose switchback in the gravel pit. It's kind of a fun little section. Nothing too challenging about it, but just a cool little elevation change. Probably looks more intimidating than anything coming up to it, but looks like some mechanical issue maybe. Don't believe he was in our class. I wasn't sure at the time. Griffin kind of went off earlier and missed that turn, so he got in the muck a little bit. You can just see him slightly ahead there now, but it wasn't for very long that I could see him, and then he disappeared again, so I knew the big thing going into today, the temperature was close to 30 degrees with the humidity, so I knew the heat was probably going to get to me by the end of the race. So as much as I wanted to push hard at the beginning, I was a little concerned about the longevity of the race and just having the stamina to push hard. There was this really rooty section. Griffin must have had a bit of an issue there that first lap through and caught back up to him again. Gets into this really tight section with a lot of roots. It was really slow and kind of technical there. Once again, Griffin didn't stick around too long. He had a peek back and saw I was there, and I'm sure that kind of gave him a little motivation to get going a bit quicker, but at this point I wasn't going to even attempt to chase him down at this point. I knew I just needed to settle down, do my own race, and not get too out of control. Of course, I missed that turn. I went in this the last year, and luckily this year it worked out a little bit better in my favor. I fell over in that hole. Anyway, it looked like a few other guys had gone through it as well, so it wasn't the first one. A couple times throughout the race, I almost missed that turn several times. Caught up to someone. At this point I wasn't entirely sure, but once I got close enough I could tell it was Caleb, and I knew he got the whole shot. So at this point I knew Hussey and Griffin were probably a little further ahead at this point, so I just thought I'd stay behind Caleb for a little while and kind of see where his strengths and weaknesses were, so maybe I could capitalize on them just to be more strategic. But I took a little wave to him there. I noticed he looked back on the corner, probably see how close I was, so had a little bit of a friendly motivation there, but just letting him know I was there. But at this point I knew I was planning to just stay behind him, and I wasn't going to try to push too hard. Harsh in a few areas, a lot of roots exposed, and conditions were really good in the woods. There was good traction. The dust wasn't too bad, so it actually was overall track conditions were really good. Temperature, I would have preferred to be a little cooler. In the morning it was like 18 degrees when we got there, and you almost needed a jacket, but by the end of by the early afternoon it had warmed up a lot, so it is what it is. I guess I should probably work on my cardio and hydration program a little bit better, but that would require a lot more work, and this is for fun, so here we are. We're going to just struggle for the next couple hours. First lap I found the bike was quite unsettled. I had put new tires front and rear on, and I had checked the pressures when I got there, and it had been sitting out in the sun, and I think the way the bike felt, it felt really harsh, so I think after a while the pressure started to lower once the tire cooled down a bit. But the first little bit of the race it was deflecting a lot and didn't seem to have a lot of rear end traction, but as the race went on it did seem to get a bit better. Still kind of following Caleb here. I'm just keep it back far enough that if something happens it gives me an opportunity to look for a different line to get around him. I saw this inside line and actually worked out alright there. Not close enough to get the pass unfortunately, but kind of an opportunity that I saw that maybe if I needed I could use that as an avenue. This little section of woods, it doesn't look like it was that harsh on camera, but it seemed to beat me up a fair bit. But kind of trying to still find that balance of standing versus sitting, but still a work in progress. But each race I do seem to capitalize on my body positioning just to kind of help conserve some energy. So this was a tight little section through there. A few times it got a little wonky on me, but just for the purpose of keeping this video as short as possible, I did cut quite a bit of the race out. Earlier on I was carrying a lower gear just until I got more comfortable with the course, navigation and that sort of thing. I ended up carrying a taller gear later on, and it did seem to help keep a better pace. Coming up through here was quite loose. Got a little wheelie for the camera. Got some moral support going on here in the corner. Got Adam and Melissa. Appreciate them sticking around and Adam taking some pictures. Probably about halfway through this lap, and I've been behind Kalen for a little while, and I have noticed he's fairly quick in the fast flowy stuff, so I knew it was going to be hard for me to get by him in any of these areas. Found the later section, well, probably the last half, give or take, maybe not quite that much, a little more technical and gnarly. There's a lot of roots in the last section. As you see, I definitely have my own set of mishaps as the race goes on. It always seems to help to have people cheering you on. Sometimes you're like out there and you get pretty jacked up and exhausted. So it's always good to have some people walking around cheering you on. Through here, I felt like I was coasting a fair bit. I wasn't really pushing it, so it's kind of one of those times where I started to kind of understand where I might be able to capitalize and get around them, but I didn't really need to push too hard right yet. I knew there was no one immediately behind us, so I had a little bit of time, but I guess in hindsight, if I gotten around sooner, it could have helped. But coming through there, I hit something. I didn't know what it was, but the next lap around I did notice there was a stump there sticking out maybe 3 or 4 inches. That one almost got me into a tree, but luckily I was able to avoid anything catastrophic. Did notice Kalen took a different line through there, and I was avoiding that the last couple laps, and definitely was the quicker line through there. I did lose a little bit of distance on him there. Not much, but every little bit counts sometimes. So it was a tight little section where there's a lot of exposed roots. It's hard to tell, but there's quite a bit of sliding going on with the tires on those roots that are kind of 45-degree angle in the trail. Coming down through this section, it was a new, just cut out section, and Caleb kind of got bucked off there a little bit. Kind of threw him off his flow a little bit, so I got a little closer to him, and just to let him know I was there. I didn't really rev too much at him at this point. At this point, I started noticing he was getting off his flow, so I gave him a little rev there just to let him know I was there. Still an awkward spot to try to get by anywhere here. There's some deep ruts. It's narrow, so came up here and he did pull over to the left a little bit, let me go, gave him a little wave, and appreciated that. At this point in the race, I was feeling pretty good. I was working on drinking consistently throughout the race. I always seem to forget about that. It's hard to tell on camera, but there was a couple really exposed roots there, and then like a kind of a mossy, marshy area. And, it was more challenging than it looked, for sure. Not exactly sure. I thought maybe that was Hussey at first, but in hindsight it wasn't. But might have been someone else in a different class there that I went by. But I knew I was a little ways back now. The dust had settled, so we were getting spread out a little bit. So kind of mentally I was like, do I try to pick up the pace and try to gain some ground back on the guys in front of me, or just kind of keep running a pace that I was comfortable at. It was a tight section through there. The soil was quite loose and there was a lot of roots, but never caused a lot of issue for me. But had some potential, a little tight there going through that line. There's a lot of nice flowy sections up through this course. Definitely the longest lap time that we had. There's some guys to the right there. Actually, I can still feel that. My thigh is still bruised and swollen from that one.
Yeah.
I'd been taking the inside line there, so I got used to that. And the left line just ended up, the berm was quite soft and just pushed the front out a little too far, and she slid out on me. But it did end up kind of, when I went over, I must have caught my left hand on the hand guard. Ended up having a little cut on my hand, nothing major, but at this point I could feel my thigh and my left hand, and they were kind of burning a little bit, but wasn't enough to warrant to stop, but I just kind of needed to settle down, get me jacked up a little bit. Definitely coming into the tail end of this. I think this is about 16 minutes left on my watch there. I knew the lap times were around 30 minutes. I wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention to that, so.
Oh, yeah, boy.
Yeah, I definitely deflected off something in there. I know it maybe didn't look as bad, but to try to hang on to the bike to prevent it from falling over, you just use so much energy. And coming through this tight section, I had no flow. I was just sloppy, and I was kind of half deflecting off of some of the roots and the bases of the trees. Kind of pitiful, but anyway, we got through that section and came down here and kicked sideways and just bouncing off trees and putting me off in the grass. But anyway, it felt way worse than it actually was. Apparently I got on the gas way too soon and I was out too wide and loose. But yeah, that was my sigh of, I don't want to do another lap. I think there's 3 minutes on the watch there now, so I was like, I knew it was going to be close coming back through timing scoring. And sure enough, there were minute 56, minute 57, so maybe 3 minutes left. I didn't know how close the guy was behind me, so I was kind of half debating just sitting there and waiting, but probably the stubbornness of me decided to just keep going just in case. The last lap I definitely struggled in certain areas. Through these tighter sections I hit a tree and then pretty near fell off the bike. I could barely even sit on it at this point. Stalled the bike. Yeah, this is probably where a pit board would come in handy if you knew what kind of gap you had with the guy in front of you or behind you, just to kind of give you an idea where you're at. But there's a couple different lines here. Not sure if that was the slower line or not, but it was the line I took the first time and it didn't cause me any issues, so I said I'm just going to use that every time after. Down here, it's hard to see, but there's a view of the Bay of Fundy there. It's quite a view. This last lap I was pretty tired, so I was kind of just putting this one in just to finish off the race on a good note. But I'm glad I did, because there was 5 guys, I believe it was, that ended up doing one more lap in total than the rest of the group, so if I had waited, I definitely wouldn't have done as well in this race. It's kind of a fun section at the tail end coming downhill. Of course, the GoPro doesn't do a lot of justice with elevation changes, but a little bit of a drop there. And it's kind of a fun little flowy section coming down. And here we are coming into start-finish. It was 2 hours and 22 minutes, so definitely a long race, but ended up in third, which I'm happy with. Didn't have any catastrophic issues, but I just found out I got third, so...
Really?
Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and see you next round.
So much better.